In today's Quick Strike report, we're refighting one of the fiercest battles in Normandy. It's June 25th, 1944, and we're taking you into the deadly tank graveyard of the Odon River Valley, where the British are about to launch two major offensives, Operations Martlet and Epsom, to break the stalemate west of Caen. But the British are about to run headlong into the 2nd SS Panzer Corps, setting up a vicious week-long battle that our club will refight on this stunning custom table. Can the British outflank Caen, or will the 2nd SS Panzer Corps hold the Odon River Valley? Three weeks after the Allies splashed ashore at Normandy, the German defenses in hedgerow country have stiffened. General Bernard Montgomery once boasted his men would capture Caen within a day of the invasion. That promise remains unfulfilled. With the front lines locked in a stalemate, both sides are massing reserves for major offensives. Montgomery plans an elaborate two-part operation to unhinge the Germans at Caen. Operation Epsom will sweep around the city, while Operation Martlet is designed to secure the high ground west of Epsom's flank. But the Fuhrer has a similar plan in mind. He orders the concentration of the 2nd SS Panzer Corps in precisely the same sector, intent on driving a fatal wedge between the American and British lines. And so, in late June, it will be strength against strength in the Odon River Valley. Thanks largely to overwhelming Allied air power, it's the British who complete their concentration first and throw the first punch the morning of June 25th. This is the battlefield for Operation Martlet, 6 kilometers deep by 4 kilometers east to west. It's a custom tabletop built by Bruce Weigle, who generously offered to run the scenario for our club to play. He's testing and developing a new set of rules for grand tactical World War II games called Gained by Battle. Ed, Miles, and Dave are the three British players today. At their disposal is the newly arrived 49th West Riding Division, backed by the veteran 8th Armored Brigade. Their objectives are to secure the town of Fontenay, the Tessel Wood, and most importantly, the critical high ground of the Rauray Spur. Montgomery wants to deny the Germans this ridgeline as an artillery position to threaten Operation Epsom. Tony, Josh, and Greg command the Germans with a mixed collection of understrength formations, but they are all battle-hardened veterans. There are elements of Panzer LEHR, the 12th SS Panzer Division, and a Kampfgruppe from the 2nd SS Panzer Corps. The Germans must not only hold their positions in the sector, but they are also under direct orders from the Fuhrer himself to muster a major counterattack, no matter the odds. But here in our club basement, Tony, Josh, and Greg decide that the Fuhrer bunker basement in East Prussia is far enough away for them to interpret their orders more liberally.
Right, so their defensive line needs to be anchored
on the road,
from
essentially.
there to there.
Yeah.
So using that woods and that town there.
Yeah.
Whoever's running Panzer here only has 2 action.
Rather than hold every inch of ground to the last man, they secretly plan to abandon Panzer LEHR's forward position, retreating 4 kilometers to the rear, where they hope to lure one wing of the British attack into isolating itself for a counterattack by the expected arrival of the 2nd SS Panzer. Setting this trap is a dangerous gamble, as it assumes the British will take the bait. And based on the British pre-battle conference, it appears the Germans might get their wish. Ed is the overall British commander. He issues clear orders for Dave and Miles to avoid a direct approach to the Rauray Spur.
This is what I want to do though, fellas. I want to take this town first, that, and then the third objective, I want to go the whole way down there, avoid that creek, and take that. I don't want to come anywhere near this, although I know that's the valuable real estate.
That's interesting because
On turn 1, the British operation kicks off in true Monty fashion with an orderly, well-organized effort to hit Fontenay from all directions, backed by a crushing barrage of Allied artillery. A string of British barrage markers pummel the German forward positions. The advance on the morning of the 25th is swift, moving across a broad front, the entire 4-kilometer width of the table. The town of Fontenay comes under immediate attack by Miles, who drives his British infantry into the streets to engage infantry of the 12th SS Panzer Division. By midday on June 25th, the Germans have withstood the initial British surge and now look to commit their own reserves into a counterattack. Josh gathers scattered elements of 2 panzer battalions to charge ahead into Miles on the right flank. In a sharp, decisive action, the British are forced back into an area of woods where they are surrounded and annihilated.
Oh! Broken!
Meanwhile, Greg is bringing up a strong battalion of Panzer Grenadiers and half-tracks, but instead of sending them to defend the Rauray Spur as they did historically, Greg motors headlong toward Fontenay, where the Germans have designs on contesting this critical town. In the late afternoon turn, the German half-tracks blast into Fontenay and surprise Miles and Dave, who believed they were about to mop up the last German resistance in the area. Instead, the British are thrown back to the city outskirts. It is now the night phase, where each side can rally broken formations and shift reserves. The rules we're testing today, gained by battle, are intended for multi-day engagements. Each day is divided into 3 daytime turns and 1 night turn for reorganization. Day 2 of our scenario is June 26. Thwarted in their hope for a quick capture of Fontenay, the British now organize their forces for a major coordinated drive into the town. Miles aims to feed 2 fresh battalions to the action, but the first is caught in the open by Josh's panzers lurking aggressively on the flank. If you're thinking these miniatures look quite tiny, you're right. They are 3mm Pico armor figures from Oddsmal Army. Here's a quick comparison to show you the relative difference between a 15mm, 6mm, and a 3mm Tiger tank. And now back to our battle. Miles' 2nd Battalion scurries across the open ground and successfully surges into Fontenay, tipping the balance of the bloody, grinding contest for this objective. Some flame-throwing crocodiles from Dave help seal the victory, driving Greg's Panzer Grenadiers back in disarray. Meanwhile, on the western edge of the table, Dave is driving the British aggressively down the flank, just as had ordered. Tony's Germans fall back with token resistance, also as planned. As their second day draws to a close, the British celebrate the capture of Fontenay, while the Germans watch with gleeful anticipation as Dave's British advance falls neatly into the salient they vacated. During the nighttime phase, Tony, Josh, and Greg convene to sort out the details of exactly how they will snap the trap closed around Dave's isolated column. The German plan for Day 3, the final day of our game, is ambitious. Greg's reformed Panzer Grenadiers will hold the center, while Josh swings his panzers across the battlefield to crash into the British flank. Meanwhile, Tony will bring up the long-awaited Kampfgruppe from the 2nd SS Panzer Division, while also hitting the British with the Panzer LEHR. The morning of June 27 sees clear skies and swarms of Allied aircraft patrolling the area. Dave and Miles drive their infantry out of Fontenay to hit the Panzer LEHR and the Texel Wood, peeling off one of the critical formations that Tony hoped to employ in his counterattack. When the hidden movement marker for Tony's long-awaited Kampfgruppe Weidinger is revealed on the southern table corner, it's mostly SS infantry with just a single Panther company. If the Germans hoped that this Kampfgruppe would provide the punch needed to punish the overextended British vanguard, they now realize that they've brought a knife to a tank fight. Most of the 8th Armored Brigade is here in force with swarms of Shermans and M10s. Josh swings his panzers into the melee to support, but it's a punishing engagement with heavy losses on both sides. But these are losses the Germans simply cannot afford to sustain. As night falls across the sector, both sides have achieved some of their objectives, but not all. The British advance, despite a deep penetration, has not secured the Rauray high ground Montgomery so desperately wanted, but the Germans have little to celebrate. Their counterattack to encircle and trap Dave's 8th Armored Brigade failed to deal a decisive blow. But what did our referee think of the action?
Okay, we had an interesting game today. This is like the 8th iteration of this particular scenario, and no 2 have been alike. And this particular one, the Brits were much more adventuresome. They tried for a long hook, and the Germans, with their interior lines, managed to, if not outmaneuver the British, at least check them at every point that the Brits were about to break through. So, well done.